The stars outside the window moved slowly as the alien ship cruised through deep space. Inside the engineering bay of the Varellan Lightspire, a human named James Rourke wiped sweat from his forehead. He had been working for almost 10 hours straight, trying to fix a strange energy fluctuation in the ship's core. The tools were unfamiliar. The systems were far more advanced than anything humans had back on Earth. But he was making progress. James was the only human on the ship. The rest of the crew belonged to the Zarellan Empire, an ancient and powerful alien race known for their elegance, intelligence, and strict discipline. They were tall, graceful beings with pale skin and glowing silver eyes. Their armor was smooth and organic-looking, almost alive. They moved like statues come to life, silent, focused, and intimidating. Most of them didn't speak to James unless it was necessary. They weren't unkind, but they kept their distance. Humans were still new to the galaxy. To the Zarellans, humans were strange, emotional, and unpredictable. But James had something they respected: skill. He was a brilliant engineer, and that was why he had been hired. Still, he often felt like a ghost walking among statues. As he adjusted a glowing green conduit on the energy core, a soft voice spoke behind him. "You fixed the resonance echo." James turned, startled. Standing behind him was Captain Rallandra, the commanding officer of the Lightspire. She was young for a Zarellan, barely 100 years old, according to their time. Like the others, she wore the traditional silver armor that covered most of her body. Her expression was unreadable. "Yes," James replied, clearing his throat. The AI couldn't locate the fault because the echo was hiding inside the third phase relay. "I had to scan manually." Rallandra stepped forward and looked at the open panel. "Our own engineers missed it." James gave a small smile. "Sometimes the old-fashioned way works." There was silence between them for a moment. Then she nodded once and walked away without another word. That was normal for Zarellans: quick, efficient, emotionless. He sighed and returned to work. Not knowing that moment had changed something. Later that day, James received an unexpected message. A short, formal note from Captain Rallandra herself. "Report to Chamber 17 at cycle mark 22. 3. Come alone." James blinked. Chamber 17 was a private area used only by senior officers. He'd never been allowed in that section of the ship. What did she want from him? At exactly 20:3, he arrived at the chamber door. It opened silently. Inside, the room was softly lit and surprisingly empty. No tools, no equipment. Just smooth white walls and a humming light from the ceiling. And in the center, standing alone, was Captain Rallandra. But she looked different. She was not wearing her armor. Instead, she wore a simple robe made of soft fabric that fell around her like water. Her silver hair was loose around her shoulders, and her silver eyes seemed less sharp. More human. James froze. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He didn't know what to say. Rallandra looked at him calmly. "You are wondering why I'm unarmored," she said. James nodded slowly. "Yes, I mean, I didn't expect this in Zarellan culture." She explained, "Removing one's armor before another is a sign of deep trust. It is not done casually. It is never done before an outsider. Until now." James swallowed, still confused. "Why me?" "You saved this ship," she said, "more than once. You see problems in ways we do not. Your methods are strange, but they work. You are not just useful. You are respected." He blinked. "Respected?" She stepped closer. "You think like no one I've met. The core issue, no one saw it. Not even our best systems. But you did. You used intuition, instinct. That is something we Zarellans do not understand." James gave a nervous laugh. "Sometimes even I don't understand it. That is why I called you here." She said, "Not to test your skills, not to give you orders. I wish to understand you." He raised an eyebrow. "Understand me? Our minds work in straight lines. Yours do not. You follow emotion. You take risks. You improvise. I wish to study this way of thinking your way." James looked around the room. "Is this part of some experiment? In a way," she said. "But more than that, it is a step, a gesture of peace. A sign that we are not so different after all. James relaxed a little. The tension in his chest began to fade. She wasn't trying to intimidate him. She was reaching out. In her own way. I'm honored, he said softly. Rollinger gave a rare smile. It was small, almost invisible. But it was there. There is much we can learn from each other, she said. And for the first time since he boarded the light spire, James didn't feel like a ghost anymore. James sat quietly across from Captain Rollinger inside the White Chamber. The room was silent except for a soft hum coming from the walls. There were no tools, no chairs, not even a table. Yet he didn't feel uncomfortable. Something about the simplicity of the space made it feel peaceful. Rollinger stood near the center, her silver robe flowing softly as she moved. Her armor was folded neatly in a corner, untouched. James still couldn't believe what he was seeing. On a human ship, removing armor would mean vulnerability. Here, it meant something more respect. I still don't understand, James said. You've never done this before. Not even with your own officers. No, Rollinger replied calmly. Not even with them. Xyrellans do not easily show trust, especially with emotions. James raised an eyebrow. You do have emotions. Then, we do. But they are quiet, controlled, taught to stay inside from the time we are born. He nodded slowly. Must be exhausting. For the first time, Rollinger let out a soft, amused breath. It wasn't quite a laugh. But it was close, perhaps. But it is tradition. James looked around the chamber. So why this? Why now? Rollinger walked a little closer and sat down, crossing her legs. Her movements were calm, graceful, almost too perfect. Because you are different. You act with emotion, but your actions bring results. You take risks, but survive. Your ways confuse me. I want to understand what makes humans like you succeed when logic fails. James sat beside her, though still a bit awkwardly. I guess we're just used to chaos. Earth was never a calm place. She tilted her head. Chaos? Yeah, unpredictable things. Nature. Politics, mistakes. We learn by doing, and failing, and trying again. Not everything can be calculated. Rollinger blinked slowly. Xyrellans do not allow failure. That's probably why your engineers missed the resonance echo. James said with a small grin. They were too careful to break anything. Her eyes flickered. And you are not afraid to break things? James shrugged. Sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to fix something. She looked down at her hands, then slowly reached into her robe and pulled out a small silver object. It looked like a coin, but it had a soft glow in the center. This is a linked node, she said. It allows for a shallow mental connection between two minds. Not full thought sharing, just a glimpse, a feeling. James stared at it. You want to use that with me? Yes, it is temporary, harmless, but you may feel what I feel. I may feel what you feel. It will help me understand you better. James hesitated. The idea of someone reading even a part of his thoughts made him nervous, but something inside him said this was important. This was bigger than science or emotion. This was trust between two species. All right, he said. Let's try. Rollinger placed the linked node between them. It hovered slightly above the floor. A soft blue glow surrounded them both. Slowly, gently. James felt a warmth spread across his chest, not physical, but emotional. Calmness, curiosity. A small flicker of fear, not his own. He looked at Rollinger and realized she was afraid, not of him, but of what this meant. She was showing him her mind, her feelings. For a Xyrellan, that was dangerous, shameful, even. And then he felt something else, a flash of confusion, awe, a strange, sharp curiosity. That was his emotion, reaching her. Her eyes widened slightly. This is very strange. James nodded. Yeah, but kind of amazing too. The connection faded slowly. The glow died out, and the link node fell back to the floor. For a few moments, they just sat in silence. Rollinger finally spoke. You feel so many things, all at once. Yeah, that's how it is, being human. Sometimes it's loud in our heads. She stood up. Now I see why you act the way you do. You are not careless. You are brave. James chuckled. I think that's the nicest thing anyone said to me all month. Suddenly, the chamber lights flickered. A sharp tone echoed through the walls. Rounder's calm expression changed instantly. She stepped over to the wall and touched a glowing panel. A voice came through. Emergency alert. Unidentified energy wave detected in Sector 9. All command staff report immediately. Rounder turned to James. We must go. Something is wrong. James stood. Want me to come? She looked at him for a second, then nodded. Yes. I want your eyes on this. As they left the chamber, Rounder reached for her armor but stopped. Then she looked at James and said, No armor today. Not with you. And they walked together through the ship's long corridors, human and alien side by side. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The alarm echoed through the corridors of the Varellan light spire. Red lights flashed, casting sharp shadows on the smooth metallic walls. James and Captain Aralandra hurried through the ship, their footsteps quick but steady. They reached the command deck where the senior officers were already gathered around the main holoscreen. The screen displayed a star map of the nearby sector, Sector 9, with a pulsing red dot moving rapidly toward them. An unknown energy wave was approaching. The ship's sensors showed it as a dark, shifting mass that absorbed energy rather than reflecting it. The officers called it Nullburn, a mysterious force that had wiped out entire fleets. In the past, no ship has survived a Nullburn attack, said the chief tactician, his voice tense. Rounder turned to James. We must find a way to stop this. Your instincts may help where our technology fails. James studied the screen. The Nullburn feed on energy. If we can confuse their sensors, maybe we can trap them. How? Rounder asked. I need to pilot a small neuro interface. Ship, you will be co-navigator. Together, we'll try a mental link. Use your logic and my instincts to control it. The officers exchanged worried looks. A human pilot? A dangerous mission? But Rounder's eyes met James's. We have no choice. Inside the small ship, the cockpit was cramped but filled with advanced controls. James sat in the pilot's chair, nervous but focused. Rounder settled beside him, connecting the link node to her temple. The mental connection sparked to life, and James felt a rush of clarity and calm. He could sense her thoughts sharp, calculated, steady. He shared with her his own feelings, hope, fear, determination. The ship surged forward, launching toward the pulsing red dot on the star map. As they neared the Nullburn mass, the ship's systems began to flicker. Energy readings dropped sharply. The Nullburn were draining the power. Stay calm, Rounder's voice echoed in his mind. Use instinct, not just logic. James nodded. He shut down non-essential systems, switching to analog controls. We need to trick them, he said aloud. Make ourselves look like an easy target. The Nullburn moved closer, its energy field pulsing wildly. James pushed the controls, sending out a low-energy pulse. The Nullburn reacted immediately, drawn to the signal. It's working, Rounder thought. Suddenly, the Nullburn struck, sending a shockwave through the ship. Alarms blared, and the small craft shook violently. James gritted his teeth, holding the controls steady. Almost there, almost. With a final push, he released a manual detonation trap, a device designed to emit a sudden burst of low-tech energy. The Nullburn recoiled, confused and disoriented. Its energy field collapsed, and the mass began to dissipate. James and Rounder shared a look of relief. We did it, James whispered. The small ship returned to the light spire, greeted by cheers from the crew. Back on the command deck, Rounder faced the officers. This victory was possible because of human creativity and courage. James smiled, exhausted but proud. For the first time, he felt truly part of something greater than himself. The Varellan light spire hummed softly as it cruised through the cold darkness of space. The ship's atmosphere was tense. The recent victory over the Nullburn had been celebrated, but the threat was far from over. The Nullburn swarm was larger than anyone expected. James sat in the strategy room, a holographic star map floating before him. Red dots dotted the screen, signs of the Nullburn spreading rapidly. The room was filled with Varellan officers, their faces serious. Captain Aralandra stood at the front, her silver armor gleaming under the soft lights. Though she had once shown James trust by removing her armor, now she wore it again, signaling the weight of the situation. "Our current weapons have little effect," said the chief tactician. The Nobran absorbed energy attacks instantly. Rallinger turned to James. "Your ideas helped us once. Do you have another plan?" James rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Yes. The Nobran rely on energy to survive. What if we give them something they want, but it's a trap?" The officers exchanged confused looks. James continued. "I propose building a low-tech device, an energy pulse trap that the Nobran will be drawn to. It won't be fancy, but it will create a sudden burst of energy that could disrupt their synchronization." A senior officer scoffed. "That sounds like ancient technology. We have advanced ships and AI. Why waste time on primitive methods?" Rallinger raised her hand to silence the room. She looked directly at James. "Sometimes, what is simple can be powerful." James nodded. "We don't have time to argue. The Nobran are coming fast. If we don't try, we lose." After a tense pause, Rallinger made her decision. "Begin construction. You will lead the project, James." James immediately gathered a small team of engineers. They worked quickly, using whatever spare parts they could find. The device was a strange mix of old and new technology, basic circuits, combined with powerful energy capacitors. Days passed. The whole ship was on edge. Every sensor pinged nervously. James barely slept, focusing on finishing the trap. One afternoon, Rallinger came to the engineering bay. She wore her armor, but this time her eyes were softer when she looked at James. "You work tirelessly," she said quietly. "It is admirable." James smiled tiredly. "I'm used to it. Humans have to fight for everything." She nodded. "Slowly, your spirit is different from ours. Bold, unpredictable." He shrugged. "Maybe that's why humans survive." Finally, the trap was ready. It was mounted on a small drone, designed to float far ahead of the fleet. The drone would emit a steady, low-level energy signal to attract the Nobran, then release a sudden energy burst. To disrupt them, the fleet prepared for battle. Tensions ran high on the bridge. Rallinger stood beside James. "This is your moment," she said. "Do not fail." James took a deep breath. "I won't." The drone launched into space, moving toward the Nobran mass. As the Nobran detected the energy signal, they swarmed toward the drone eagerly. Suddenly, the trap activated, releasing a sharp pulse of energy. The Nobran convulsed. Their energy fields cracked and shimmered. James watched, heart pounding. The pulse repeated. Then, the Nobran began to break apart, losing cohesion. Cheers erupted across the fleet. Rallinger smiled proudly. "Your gamble paid off." But not everyone was happy. The senior officers convened quietly. Some whispered concerns about trusting a human's primitive plan. Rallinger faced their doubts boldly. "This victory saved us. We must embrace all ideas, no matter their origin." James felt a new respect growing between him and the Zarellans. He was no longer just a visitor or technician. He was a vital part of their survival. That night, James stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him. Rallinger joined quietly, standing beside him without armor. "Do you ever miss Earth?" she asked softly. James looked at her. "Sometimes. But here, I feel like I'm part of something bigger." She smiled. "You have shown us a new way, not just with machines, but with hope." Together, they watched the distant stars, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. For a few days, things on the Varellan light spire were calm. The trap James built had weakened the Nobran. The ship's crew worked with more energy, and even the quiet Zarellan officers seemed more relaxed. But James couldn't shake a strange feeling. Something wasn't right. He walked through the engineering bay, checking readings and systems. All looked normal, but he noticed something odd. A diagnostic tool had been moved. It wasn't where he left it. He checked the power logs. Someone had accessed the central energy core at midnight. No one was scheduled for maintenance. James frowned. He tapped his wrist. "Calm, Captain. We might have a problem." Rallinger met him in the control chamber. She had already heard the report. "A traitor?" she asked. Her voice calm but cold. James nodded. Someone is sending energy data, possibly to the Nulburn. It could explain how they keep finding. U.S. Roundra's expression hardened. We Zarellans do not betray. But if what you say is true, we must find the source. James looked at her. I need full access to your ship's internal logs. Even the restricted ones. She hesitated. That has never been done. If we don't, we could all be destroyed. I promise to respect your system. After a pause, Roundra nodded. Very well. I will grant you access. James spent hours digging through logs, audio feeds, and maintenance reports. Most of it was routine. But then he found something strange. 1. Crew member Tarell Vox. A communications officer had access to deep system layer usually used only by the captain. He had sent encrypted signals from an old backup antenna. James brought the evidence to Roundra. This is the source. He said. Her face was. The stars ahead glowed brighter now. But James didn't feel peace. Something powerful was coming. Something ancient. The Varellan light spire floated silently above a dark planet. Deep in Nulburn territory. This was at the center of their network, their hive world. Inside the ship's command center. Captain Roundra stood tall in her black and silver armor. The crew worked quietly, their faces tense. All eyes were on the main screen. It showed a large shape rising from the shadows. Below, the Nulburn Queen. She wasn't a ship. She wasn't even a creature in the usual sense. She was a cloud of shifting energy with a glowing core in the center. Her tendrils stretched across the skies like lightning frozen in time. She pulsed with power and hate. She's searching. Roundra said, she knows we're here. James stood beside her. He had spent the past days designing a final plan. It was bold, risky, and possibly the only chance they had. If we hit her with everything we have, we lose, he said. She'll feed on it. Roundra nodded. Then we must give her what she doesn't expect. James pointed to a map. Her core is the key. If we can reach it physically, we can overload it from the inside. You mean Penter her? Roundra asked. Not me. A drone ship. Light, fast, shielded. I'll guide it from here. But it needs one thing more. He paused. Roundra already understood. You want me to guide it with you again? Through the neural link. Yes. James said. We did it once. This time we'll take it further. Preparations began. A small drone ship, just big enough to hold. The neural control pod was readied. Roundra and James entered the pod, sitting side by side. Electrolinks connected to their temples. The world faded. In its place came the strange calm of neural connection, a shared space between human instinct and Zarellan logic. Their thoughts merged again. He felt her strength, her precision, her sharp control. She felt his energy, his courage, his wild human drive. And together, they piloted the ship down into the shadow. As they entered the Nulburn Queen's reach, her energy reached out, tendrils of black lightning slicing the air. She sees us. James said, she's trying to distract. U.S. Roundra added. They swerved, dodging attacks as the ship grew hotter. The Queen's voice entered their minds, not words, but feelings, anger, hunger, confusion. She fears us, Roundra whispered. The drone broke through a wave of dark energy. Ahead, the Queen's core pulsed like a black sun. There, James shouted. They dove toward it, their minds sensed perfectly. Inside the Queen's core, everything was strange. There was no up or down, only spinning lights and folding space. Their ship shook. Systems blinked out. We're losing control, Roundra warned. James reached forward in his mind, touching hers. Not if we do it together. One last push. They locked their minds fully, and the drone ignited. A huge burst of raw, contained energy exploded from inside the Queen's core. From the outside, the crew on the light spire watched the moment. The Queen screamed, not with sound, but with a tremor. Across the stars, her body broke apart into pieces of black dust, then scattered into light. The threat was over. The Queen was gone. Silence filled the command deck. Then, slowly, the crew cheered. They had survived. Inside the neural pod, James and Roundra opened their eyes. They were weak, but alive. Their minds had traveled further than anyone before. She looked at him. Her voice was soft. You held the line. He smiled. So did you? They sat in silence for a while. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and took his hand. No words were spoken. But in that moment, something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but something stronger. Trust, understanding. A shared memory of standing in the face of death and living. Weeks later, the light spire floated near a peaceful moon. Repairs were underway. Crew members trained, rebuilt systems, and healed. James stood in the garden dome, looking up at the stars. Roundra joined him, wearing no armor this time, just a simple uniform. You could return to Earth, she said. Your name would be known across your world. He shook his head. I think I found my place. With us? She asked. He nodded. Not just as your engineer, but as something more. She turned to him. You changed the way we see things. James, you reminded us that emotion is not weakness. That instinct can guide us. Even in the darkest times, he smiled. You taught me control, balance, and how to be calm in chaos. They looked up together. Above them, the stars no longer looked dangerous. They looked full of promise.